Okay, so again, my name is Gary, but you can call me Double A. I'm American, and I love automation. So what kind of automation, you may ask me? It's DevOps automation, workflow automation, job automation. And so I kind of changed the title of the talk. It's making automation like Docker. And so what does this actually mean? And so let's kind of look at the state of software automation. So this is kind of like the state of automation. I'm not talking about like automation per se, but like end-to-end automation, to do automation fully. And so it's kind of like unit tests. You know, the more unit tests, the more test coverage you have, the greater confidence you have in your actual code. And the greater automation you have, the more automation you have, the greater confidence you have in your ability to test, build, deploy your application, scale your application, run your analytics, provide security, estimate costs. And so, you know, what makes automation or end-to-end automation difficult? Well, there are a lot of choices, as you can see. And integrating these choices requires a lot of resources. And integrating these choices also requires high expertise. And so what is the regular person to do when you're kind of faced with this kind of dilemma? So let's kind of take a look at, let's begin with taking a look at what makes Docker great. Oops. So this is Docker. Well, Docker actually doesn't require a lot of expertise. It's actually very simple. The Docker file is pretty simple to read and write. Environmental variables kind of drive the container behavior. Docker containers are actually built on top of Docker containers. You layer on top of each other. Docker containers are self-contained. So the good thing about them is that they just run. They just work out of the box. Docker containers kind of isolate your services. You're able to troubleshoot and debug them pretty quickly. And most Docker containers, almost all Docker containers, begin open source. And so you kind of have control of your Docker containers, and you're able to customize those Docker containers. So going back to the question, how do we make automation like Docker? And so at ElasticDev, we're trying to promote this kind of open source marketplace where automation is created. And so we're taking a marketplace approach to automation. Instead of a Docker file, we have these things called stacks. And stacks basically encapsulate automation. You build automation on top of automation. Instead of a Docker registry, again, we have this open source marketplace. The open source marketplace is where automation is created, modified, and shared. Instead of a Docker engine, we have the SaaS, which just takes the stack, interprets it, and spits out the automation. So notably, we want to kind of emphasize that this is a community, and this is an open source community. And so we want to kind of highlight that it's the open source power that's going to actually transform the landscape that is automation, or at least end-to-end automation. Okay, putting it all together. We're trying to bridge the gap between the DevOps engineer and the devs. The DevOps engineer publishes the automation, the dev selects it, and instantiates the automation. And it spits out like automation like Kubernetes, or penetration scans, or security scans, or Docker CI. So you may ask, well, you know, Docker has layers. How do you know what goes into your stacks? So with stacks, they're highly introspective, meaning that when you upload a stack, all the assets are pre-assembled, they're locked, and they're versioned. And so you're able to actually see who published it, where it came from, and the actual commit hash. And so you actually kind of have this kind of graph dependency tree. And so you have the ability to kind of see what's going in your automation. Okay, so back to the question. How do you make automation like Docker? And then again, we kind of answered by saying we're going to take an open source marketplace approach to it. Instead of Docker files, we have stacks. They're written in simple Python. Variables or stack arguments drive the behavior of the automation. Stacks, again, are built on top of stacks. Automation built on top of automation. They're self-contained. Stacks kind of work out of the box. You can reproduce automation from environment to environment, just like a Docker container. And lastly, stacks all begin open source. They're controlled by the user, and they're customized by the user. All right, screenshot demo. So the scenario is I'm a developer, and I just want to begin a new project, and I don't know anything about automation. But I kind of want to get started, and I need automation to make me more productive. So let's say I have a repository in Dockerfile. I want to do CI/CD. It's real simple. I go to the marketplace, select these open source stacks. I notice one called EC2 CI. I look at the description of it. It basically creates an ECR repository in AWS. It creates a Docker host. And all you need is the AWS credentials repository and a Docker file. And so I take the little YAML snippet, and I modify it. And boom, I got CI. I know nothing about automation. I just know that I need CI, right? And boom, actually don't know anything about ECR, but it creates the repository for me, and actually it tags all the containers to the commit hash. Again, this is a form of automation. We're not CI experts. This is just a stack. And so there's other stacks that are available. There's a stack that does Docker Hub. There's no stack that does Quail.io, so people could just kind of grab that, tweak it, and then upload and republish it for others to use. And so as an American, say, righteous. We're happy developers. And so, I don't know, I thought this slide was funny, but it's not that funny. I don't know, did you know it's Bill Gates? I wasn't sure I offend you guys, so, or really encourage you guys. So again, our main intent is to ask you guys to be part of this community. We're not the Docker or container experts, but Docker, Kubernetes, they're all part of this kind of automation landscape. And so they run in conjunction with VPCs or RDS or serverless or data lakes. And so with that, this ends the presentation. Thanks for your time.